Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition. If you'd like to join us a little bit later, we'll open up the phones because we certainly have lots to talk about today. Of course, the immigration order by the president. A little bit later, we'll be talking about whether or not Christian clubs can be permitted in the public schools. What about these filibuster rules that might change in the Senate? Of course, we've in the last couple of weeks been talking about Jonathan Gruber as well as Obamacare, and maybe some news out of Ferguson, Missouri. Lots to talk about today. As always, we have Penna Dexter and Kelly Shackelford. And Penna, I assume you heard the message last night by the president?
I did. And, there's so many things to discuss here on Point of View. I mean, another thing you didn't mention is that there's this big confab on marriage going on in Rome.
Yes.
And, so many things that we focus on here on the program, but this kind of takes it all.
Yes.
When you have a president who could come in and basically contravene Congress, just contradict what he knows is the will of the two legislative bodies that, are duly elected by the people, that he could come in and just do that. It's a little scary. It's really scary for America.
We've heard, Kelly, that people have said this is unprecedented and unconstitutional, so I thought I'd have a constitutional scholar weigh in on some of your comments before we have a chance to hear from the president.
Yeah, I feel like I was just thinking about this on the way in, that there are so many different layers of the onion to unpeel here. Is this legal? Is it constitutional? That's one. Is it, what are the political implications, right? That's a whole set of questions. And then third is it a good policy? so there's all these things, but I think the most important, maybe that's because I'm prejudiced, but I don't think so. The most important is it constitutional? Because what is going on here, I think, is incredibly dangerous. This is about the powers of the president versus the powers of Congress. And this is the guy who himself said, well, I can't do what he just did. I'm not a king or an emperor. That's not how our system works. And he was exactly right when he said that, by the way. You can look at I encourage everybody, read your Constitution. And you will find that it specifically gives the enumerated power over immigration and naturalization to Congress.
Article 1.
It is not given to the president. And so you can't, it's essentially like Obama got up last night and said, I am dispensing with the need for the Supreme Court. What would you do in that? You create a constitutional crisis. And even somebody as, noted liberal, Jonathan Turley, said he is tearing at the fabric of the Constitution. And that's exactly what he's doing. And this is a test somewhat. Let's see if I can just, take over power of the Congress and if I can get away with this. But it's really disturbing that it's not just something that is unconstitutional. It's something he knew was unconstitutional, and he's still doing it to test the line.
He knew it was unconstitutional. He also knew that the House and Senate have considered similar policies and have rejected them. And he, of course, waited until after the elections that took place in November. He knew that it was politically unpopular. And it's very interesting. I've been just reading different columns and articles in the Wall Street Journal the last couple of days about this issue. And the Wall Street Journal is famously pro-immigration reform. They want more workers in this country to be legal and all of that. So they think, in a sense, that some of where this is going is good. But they have been scathing about what the president has done and how he has done it. And one of them, Daniel Henninger, said that he's turning the presidency into a cruise missile against Republicans. And he talked about him being a technocrat in chief and redesigning not only our immigration system, but also our healthcare system and our financial system. And then, when you think of all the other instances where he's defied the rule of law, like in the marriage issue, it's really, it's overwhelming. He said he'd be transformative, and he absolutely is fulfilling that promise.
And you got to go to the Democrats. I think it'd be very interesting, the people on his side, and see what they think about this exercise of power, and then say, okay, then that means if there's a Republican president, it's okay for him to do the same thing on, environmental protections, on whatever issue.
Taxes. Maybe we could just abolish all taxes.
Yeah, they can the president them could say, well, these are the ones we're going to enforce, and these are the ones we're not. That's the thing that's so short-sighted, is if this kind of power is allowed to amass in the executive branch, then guess what? Somebody else is going to be holding the executive branch.
That's what I was thinking.
And so it'd be fascinating to see if the Democrats have any foresight in exactly how much power they want. Are they really for getting rid of Congress, essentially? Really, Congress doesn't serve any purpose anymore. If the president can enforce whatever laws he wishes, make new policies and laws up, and doesn't need the Congress, then why is there a need for the Congress? So it really is incredible the way this is being done. And now let's go back to how would it have been done constitutionally. The president could have made this an issue in the election. He could have said, this is a really important issue, and I want you to put people in so that we can get this done. And even across party lines, Democrat and Republican, maybe there's some who would agree with his approach. That's how you do it. And you let the people elect the people who would then pass that in Congress. But that's not what he did. He gave the back of his hand to the Constitution and the back of his hand to the American people, who just voted people in office on this very type issue, and he kept silent, and then pushes this through in an illegal fashion. There are ways to do what he wanted to do, but he wasn't willing to go through our constitutional system to accomplish those things.
He knows what's popular and what isn't, because we're polled to death here in this country. So he knows that this type of thing is not popular, but he knows that American people want some kind of reform of our system.
Right. And,
there has been a lot of proposals about doing this incrementally, which have been blocked by the White House. But that's what he could have done. I think, I think that it would have been tough to make it an election issue, because he would have lost. It would have been bad for the Democrats, but it would have been probably worse for the Democrats than it already was. But, sometimes you just have to go a different way. And he could still have gotten some immigration reform in the next 2 years. I truly believe that. It's just that you have to do it incrementally. You cannot do it comprehensively. People don't want it, and they don't trust him to do it.
But let's look at that. What Penna just said. He knew politically he wouldn't win it. So this is what presidents do now. They don't put the issues up in front of the election. They don't want those being talked about, because as soon as the election's over, they're just going to do whatever they want. They make up their own laws, make up whatever executive orders they want, and now we have the imperial presidency. That there's no responsibility to the people once you're elected. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about Congress, Supreme Court, anywhere else. I guess you just do whatever you want to do.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have a chance to hear from the president, and of course, we'll give you a chance to join our conversation today. Posted some articles, one from Republicans saying the order by President Obama is an act of war. Some, like Charles Krauthammer, have called it a distraction, and I even put a list of lawyers that actually think his order is lawful. Love to hear their comments if we had a Republican doing that in the future, but we'll take a break and come back and hear from President Obama right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
You know, a recent article in USA Today warned technology can push our crazy buttons and rewire our brains. Staying connected with digital media can be both a blessing and a curse. For many people, checking in with their devices is getting out of hand. Howard Rheingold, author of NetSmart, How to Thrive Online, recommends a mindful use of digital media. That means we should be aware of what is attracting our attention. He says you should be making decisions instead of letting the tweet or buzzing of your BlackBerry call your attention. Gary Small, a brain researcher at UCLA, has found that the digital technology is changing our brains. Since the human brain changes in response to the environment, our use of the technology alters our brain pathways. He has documented this through MRIs and has reported his findings in scientific journals. Larry Rosen, author of I Disorder, Understanding Our Obsession with Technology and Overcoming Its Hold on Us, says that technology is causing some people to exhibit various psychological disorders. This would include addiction, depression, narcissistic personality disorder, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. He is concerned that we have become too enmeshed with these technologies. Psychiatrist Stephen Davis of the Baltimore-Washington Medical Center says we get feedback from digital technology. The retweets and bings and pings that come out of our phone every time someone sends us a text message create a reward system in the brain that gives us a little squirt of dopamine each time. For some people, this can lead to something that looks like addiction as their brains respond to digital technology. These are just a few experts who are concerned about the effects of digital technology in our lives, and I'm even more concerned about their impact on the younger generation whose brains are being rewired in ways we can't even imagine. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford is Weekend Edition. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. President last night spoke to the American people. It was a rather limited opportunity because none of the major networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox, did not carry it. Fox News did, and Telemundo did, and Univision, a few others, but not everybody had a chance to see it or hear it, so we wanted to give you a chance to hear what the president had to say. He says that immigration has blessed this country, but he says this current system isn't working.
For more than 200 years, our tradition of welcoming immigrants from around the world has given us a tremendous advantage over other nations. It's kept us youthful, dynamic, and entrepreneurial. It has shaped our character as a people with limitless possibilities. People not trapped by our past, but able to remake ourselves as we choose. But today, our immigration system is broken, and everybody knows it.
Let's, if we can, then focus on a few of the facts he put on the table. We're going to jump ahead to the speech from where he talked about the fact that really, when you come down to it, we've been pretty good at securing our borders.
Today, we have more agents and technology deployed to secure our southern border than at any time in our history. And over the past 6 years, illegal border crossings have been cut by more than half. Although this summer there was a brief spike in unaccompanied children being apprehended at our border, the number of such children is now actually lower than it's been in nearly 2 years. Overall, the number of people trying to cross our border illegally is at its lowest level since the 1970s. Those are the facts.
So again, one of the comments there, as he said, there was a brief spike. I noticed that the fact check took that one on in particular, said a brief spike. I'm thinking we're talking about 65,000 children, and said certainly the numbers surged this year. It was more than just a brief spike. So that was one that even some of the fact checks said, well, Mr. President, that's not quite accurate. But your thoughts about this idea?
Well, our laws were such that we couldn't send those kids back. So even if we have great security at the border, we still couldn't send them back. And so in that sense, it doesn't matter. I think another reason that as many people have not come across the border is because of the economy in the last few years. When we have a good economy, we draw the people. When our economy dampens, we have fewer people coming in to try. And when you think about what the effect of this will be, because all these people are almost all of them will be able to now apply for work permits. And what it's going to do to our economy is a big, big unknown. I mean, some people say, well, okay, they'll be paying taxes. They'll also be taking welfare benefits. And it's going to change the whole wage structure of the country because they'll start to be able to be more demanding about what they get. Now, that might be good for some wage earners in America, but it's going to affect businesses across the nation. So there's a lot of unknowns there. And that's why this president, he just took it upon himself to do it because it was politically good for him. But there are repercussions that have yet to be seen.
Kelly, I get the sense that a lot of Americans would say, I wouldn't be opposed to trying to find a path to citizenship to these people if I knew we weren't going to do it again. But, 1986, Simpson-Mazzoli, you get the sense that it'd just be another cohort here. And so the key to that is, do we have a secure border? And the president seems to be saying, yeah, I think we have a secure border. But when 65,000 children walk across the border, it doesn't seem very secure to me.
Yeah, I think unfortunately for the president, he's had such a problem telling the truth that nobody can know whether he's telling the truth or not. So I don't think anybody really believes what he says. If you like your doctor, you can keep him. If you like your health care policy, you can keep it. I mean, we could go on and on and on, and people know that you just can't trust what he says. We've got the Gruber stuff coming out that shows that they were lying about Obamacare on purpose to try to deceive the American people. So when he comes and says the border's secure, I don't think most people believe that. I certainly know that, we have the story just within the last few weeks of the one guy who was captured 3 or 4 different times in the United States, and even though he was a criminal, was sent back only to come back again, and he ended up killing a police officer.
Catch and release.
Yeah. So I don't think people feel that the border is secure at all. I don't think they buy what he's saying.
I want to get your comments on this one because he makes the claim that his executive order is legal and that it makes the immigration system more just.
I continue to believe that the best way to solve this problem is by working together to pass that kind of common sense law. But until that happens, there are actions I have the legal authority to take as president, the same kinds of actions taken by Democratic and Republican presidents before me, that will help make our immigration system more fair and more just.
Love to get your comments. One of the articles I posted here is actually written by a number of lawyers that are arguing that prosecutorial discretion is something that is allowed by the president. And of course, they probably had to work pretty hard to find some because, as you said, there are people like Jonathan Turley, who's a supporter of the president, a Democrat at George Washington Law School, nevertheless saying this is going beyond the bounds. But what about this argument that's being made that you do have some discretion as a prosecutor and the president has some discretion in terms of implementing executive actions?
Well, sure. I mean, prosecutors have discretion. I mean, they have discretion to decide, well, is this person have enough, evidence against them to be prosecuted? Or I've got 10 murders and I only have enough resources to do 5 of these right now. I mean, of course they have discretion. They don't have the discretion to go, the murder laws, I don't think we're going to apply those anymore. And that's essentially what they're doing here. They're taking parts of the law, and it's not like something that was like passed way back and nobody's talking about it. I mean, this is stuff that Congress is considering, and he's just, again, in this case, what this is not prosecutorial discretion. This is subversion. It's the president thinking, I'm going to become the legislature. I'm now going to write the laws, but I'm going to do it through, an executive order. And you don't do. I mean, this is way over what prosecutorial discretion gives people.
You look back to the other times when various presidents, the ones that have been mentioned are Reagan and Bush, have done with regard to executive orders and regulations having to do with immigration, but most of their orders have implemented what Congress had already passed. And this is different. This is the opposite of what Congress has done. So it's a big difference, and it's really disingenuous for them to use that. I wanted to go back to one thing he said, too, about immigration in our country, and we're a nation of immigrants. And that's true. But this is such a big number. It's critical mass. And when you you're supposed to be able to control your immigration so that you can have time to assimilate the people. So you allow some immigration, and you should be able to say what kind of people are allowed into the country, too. What kinds of people do we need to fill jobs? But instead, this is people who many of these people are going to be dependent upon our big welfare state that we have with all kinds of benefits and Obamacare and all of that. I mean, yes, they say that they're not going to be citizens, but, it's going to be incremental. We're going to have all kinds of civil rights arguments about these people. They're going to end up citizens, and they're going to end up voters, and that's the point.
We put out this infograph yesterday, and it had a lot of facts and figures, and one of those, the argument of nation of immigrants. Well, historically, maybe your grandparents, your great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, but 95% of the people in America right now were born here in America. So that's the first issue. But you raise a second one, and that is, can we not choose the people we need? And the example I used yesterday, which I borrowed from Senator Marco Rubio, will give full credit, is each year this economy generates about 100,000 new jobs for computer engineers. And that is because we have such a dynamic economy and we have the digital platforms exploding. So we need, as a country, 100,000 computer engineers every year. We only in this country graduate 40,000 computer engineers. First of all, a word to any listener out there that's thinking, if you're good in math and science, go into computer engineering. You'll be like a bonus baby when you graduate. But the point is, there's a place where we would love to bring in people from South Africa, from China, if we could, from Japan, from Germany, from Belgium, from the UK. If they want to get a job right here, if they want to come in from India, we would love to have those individuals because we are creating jobs that they can fit immediately into, and they will not be dependent on the economy. They will be generating an incredible amount to the gross domestic product. But when instead the people we are allowing in are the people that walk across our border, or many of them come here legally and they overstay their visas. About 40% of the illegal aliens in this country actually overstayed their visas. So they came here legally, but then they became illegal when they stayed here. And it seems to me that we should be able to have some control of our borders. And so when we take a break, we'll come back, and the president has 3 points to his plan. Wanted to hear from him. We also have quite a number of calls. We'll try to get to those calls as soon as possible. And just wanted to give you a chance to hear a few things about what President Obama said last night and the impact that it can have on you and your family. If you'd like to know a little bit more, we have posted quite a bit on the website today. And again, you can find out more about all the topics we are addressing by simply finding those articles. And a little bit later, we'll be talking with Kelly Shackelford about some other issues. I see a trend here, don't I? These Christian clubs are having problems, so we'll talk about that. And of course, we'll take your phone calls. All of it coming up right after these important messages.
There is a big incentive to pay your electric bill. If you don't, you find yourself cold and in the dark. But who pays to make sure you're educated on the key issues of the day, to bring you wisdom for life at work, at home, and in the culture, like you hear from guests here on Point of View? Who makes sure that our electric bill gets paid? You're way ahead of me, aren't you? That's right. You do. The truth is, if every listener this week gave just $5, we could pay our bills for about the next 3 years. Did you hear me? $5, 3 years. Now, perhaps you can give more. How about $50 or $500, maybe even more? But please, don't be the one who fails to send at least $5. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or send $5 to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Whatever amount you chip in, thank you for your gift. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We'll get to those calls in just a minute. Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. Let's go back to the president, in which he took the time to lay out his plan. He really had three important points, so here are the details of his plan.
First, we'll build on our progress at the border with additional resources for our law enforcement personnel. so that they can stem the flow of illegal crossings and speed the return of those who do cross over. Second, I'll make it easier and faster for high-skilled immigrants, graduates, and entrepreneurs to stay and contribute to our economy, as so many business leaders have proposed. Third, we'll take steps to deal responsibly with the millions of undocumented immigrants who already live in our country.
So again, just a couple of key points. Penna, any comments?
Well, I love how he puts them in that order, because the part for allowing people with high skills to stay is very small and limited. It's not a big hunk of it. In fact, it was disappointing to a lot of business leaders.
Yes.
And as far as the border, great. That's if they really do that, that's fine. The third part is the worrisome part, and we can talk about it when we get more detail.
You know, one of the other issues is that border, and that is we've got a border between Mexico and the United States, 1,954 miles. We have fences on 700 of those miles. And there has been a question as to whether or not they'll ever build those fences because they're that expensive. So that's why we've had over 10,000 drone flights. And he wants to send more Border Patrol agents. All good. But it gets back to this question of whether or not you have secured the border.
Yeah.
If you have not, then what's in the back of the minds of at least a lot of Americans, and why they're somewhat hesitant about this, is if we do this again, will we be doing this again? In other words,
you draw people.
Yeah. It becomes
It's an
a magnet.
incentive, yeah.
And that's the real question. If indeed it is too easy to get here, either by overstaying your visa, by crossing a border, by jumping on a boat, whatever it might be, and it's also too hard sometimes, or very difficult, I don't want to make it overplay that, to be a legal resident. We even had somebody the other day that was saying, can't we move the requirement from 5 years to 3 years? And can't we maybe reduce some of the bureaucratic hurdles? Because it seems like we're making it almost too difficult to be a legal citizen and making it maybe a little too easy still to be an illegal citizen. Yeah. So just a couple thoughts. Kelly, excuse me.
Look, 5 million, I mean, and we haven't gotten into this yet, but making 5 million people, all of a sudden it's okay to stay. I mean, how many of those people have criminal backgrounds? You know,
that's my other question, because you have to check them out. You have 5 million, and then I just gave the number the other day, 7,000 ICE agents. So divide 5 million by 7,000 in order to make sure that if you give them a green card or a whatever work card or whatever it is, that they should stay in this country.
Yeah, and especially when you put it with these people in the executive branch that are so committed to enforcing the border. And that he says, we've done an incredible job, we're doing great, although we're going to add more resources. If they're so perfect, I don't know why they need more resources. But what were these people doing? They were taking people who had committed felonies and 3 different times and told, you go home and don't do this again, okay? This is the mindset of the administration. This was coming directly from the president, that supposedly we're now supposed to trust as they go through 5 million people and decide, we know what's going to happen. The criminals are just going to be getting a card. And so, it's just the way they've handled things. I think he would have been much more believable if he would have said, we've done some things wrong.
And here's what we need to do to fix it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the American people, if you really want to close the border, it's going to cost you an additional $1 billion. Okay.
Yeah.
At least I'm listening.
Exactly. We did this catch and release thing. It was really dumb. We're not going to make that mistake. That would have been so much more. I think the American people would love somebody to be honest. But unfortunately, this president, it's all about sort of PR and looking good, and so. The idea is he can't even say we're not doing a good job securing the border. He's admitting one of the first things I'm committed to is more resources on the border. But we're doing a great job already. So you really don't even need that stuff. That really doesn't sell very well. So I think he would have done a lot better for himself if he would have been honest at the problems that we are having and the things that need to be changed.
I wanted to come back to, you said that about the card, and then I wanted to connect that up to the election, because a lot of people say, okay, do these individuals who now get permanent legal status, do they also get a driver's license. Now, we did have a vote on that in the state of Oregon. Now, Oregon, for most of our listeners, if you've never been there before, and I've lived there before, one of my college degrees is from Oregon, my wife is from Oregon, so I have a lot of understanding of the state of Oregon. It's about as blue a blue state as you can find. Up until a couple of years ago, there were fewer people by percentage that went to church in Oregon than any other state. Now, Vermont has that record, and it's kind of second. So this is a state that is pretty much dominated by Democratic politics, certainly a very progressive state in that regard. They had a particular initiative on their ballot as to whether or not to grant driver's license to illegal aliens, and it failed. So in the one place where you would think that idea would have some kind of favorability, California, Colorado, Oregon, Vermont, maybe there's a few places where that might have passed. When it was put to a vote, the people, the citizens of the state of Oregon voted it down. What does that tell you?
I don't think it just failed. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was 67%.
Oh, yeah. It completely died.
It was, and again, this is, as you're saying, this is a very liberal state. So it just shows the American people are not for this type of thing. Number one, it's really bad for the safety of the American citizen. Let's give all the ISIS people, a driver's license, so they can roam free in the U.S. And people know that they're trying to come over the border. So, I think that's the interesting thing. And that's what is somewhat disturbing about what the president is doing. He's taking an action as the chief executive that is not an executive action. It's a legislative action. And the reason he's doing it is because the people don't want it done, and so it's not going to get through the legislature. And that's what's really disturbing. He's as Jonathan Turley said, he's tearing at the fabric of the Constitution. Why? Because of some policy issue he really wants to get through, and it can't get through constitutionally. That's the kind of thing we got to make sure doesn't happen, because every president in the future, if you allow this precedent to be set, every president in the future is going to have something they really believe in that the Congress is dragging their heels on.
It's like they're taking things so casually, because they say, well, this is only for 3 years. It's temporary. Like, in 3 years, you're going to have all these people with jobs working here. And we're going to turn around and make them totally illegal. I mean, that is not going to happen. And, another thing it does is it creates a different class. It creates a legal, permanent underclass in the country, which I'm not sure that's a wise idea either.
Yeah. One of the articles we posted just the other day was by Charlie Cook. And really what it is, if I can summarize a very long article, is why liberals always win. And that is, he was using the example first of Obamacare. Right now, of course, there's a big challenge, Kelly, as you and I have talked about, that whether or not you can pay any kind of subsidy to various states that don't have a state exchange. Well, even if the Supreme Court rules against Obamacare, you know what the argument will be. Well, these poor people that received it, you're not going to take it away from them. The same kind of argument Charlie Cook makes about this issue. After a couple of years of individuals who have that permanent legal status, you're not going to take that away from them. As a matter of fact, it's going to go the other direction. Because, Kelly, you know as well as I do, some advocate group is going to find somebody who's disenfranchised in some way or another and say, you can't have these people just be in legal limbo. They should have a driver's license. They should be allowed to vote. They should have access to our health care facilities. And essentially, they become de facto citizens. Now, that doesn't happen today. I had somebody call yesterday and say, that's not what the president's doing right now. All he's doing, of course, anytime anybody says all he's doing, hold on to your pocketbook. Yes, all he's doing right now is taking them out of the shadows. But while everybody else is looking at this playing checkers, he's playing chess. Because I think he knows, and I think Chuck Schumer knows, and I think a lot of other people know that once you get this done, then incrementally you get to the point where eventually they become full citizens of the United States. If not legal citizens, at least having all the benefits of citizenship.
No, absolutely. I mean, they're already using that argument, right? What's the most common argument when you say, we've got to do something about the illegal immigrants who are here? They say, well, you're not going to deport them all. That's unreasonable. So therefore, they immediately go to amnesty. So if they make it legal and all of a sudden 5 million people have cards and are legal in the United States, they're obviously not going to do anything. They're going to do the same kind of arguments. It's always the camel's nose under the tent, right? I mean, what Social Security was originally really small, and they said it wasn't going to grow beyond I forget what percent, and of course it's a totally different thing now, and it's very difficult to get rid of a government program.
Yes.
Very difficult.
Yeah, and what did Ronald Reagan used to say? The closest thing to immortality on earth is a government program. We'll be right back.
On my recent trip to the Holy Land, we did something very special. We visited a church at Cana in Galilee, the site where Jesus performed the first miracle, turning water to wine at a wedding. We had a ceremony there in which the married couples in our group renewed our wedding vows. It was good to do this, to ponder the meaning of the vows spoken. And it got me thinking about the weddings in which couples write their own vows. We wrote some of ours so many years ago. But when it comes to the theology of marriage, those vows are normally deficient. One Southern Baptist leader, Dr. Russell Moore, says he doesn't let couples he marries write their own vows. He was asked why not on his radio show. His answer was, quote, "Because I think we are in a culture right now where many people assume that the wedding is the celebration of the love of the couple. Now, of course it is to some degree, but it is so much more than that, and the main point of the wedding is about more than highlighting the individuality of the couple." Dr. Moore went on to say, in a biblical understanding of marriage, the couple is being given to one another, and there is an accountability, a public accountability for the marriage, for the wedding. That's the reason why Jesus is present as part of the community at a wedding at Cana, and in the epistles of the New Testament, the writings about marriage are not simply to the couples themselves, but to the entire body of Christ. We are members of one another, and we are responsible for one another. And so, when we are gathering together for a wedding, we have a gathering of witnesses. Pastor John Piper addresses wedding vows in his book, This Momentary Marriage. He writes, when a couple speaks their vows, it is not a man or a woman or a pastor or parent who is the main actor, the main doer. God is. God joins a husband and a wife into a one-flesh union. Dr. Piper's entire book is about how marriage is meant to glorify God. And that's why Jesus said in Mark 2, "What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate." When couples get married, they don't know what they will encounter over time or what their spouse will really be like in 30 years. That person could become a lot better or worse. That's why we pledge to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, and so on. John Piper says our forefathers who created these vows had eyes wide open to reality. Betrothed couples don't know what will come. When they're 20-something, they really don't know. When you pledge your troth, you promise faithfulness. In that, God is glorified. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. Let's go first to Nebraska, KCMI. Daryl, thank you for calling today. What would you like to share with our audience?
I agree with your statement just a minute ago about that as a precedent. I've done work in the university with international students, did my study on intercultural work and did some other work with that. And except for some difficulty and some expense of citizenship, the immigration system we have now is not broken. In the past, we had immigration periodically forbidding immigrants from certain countries, but the president's statement about what's going on today is misleading and I'd say actually dishonest.
So you say it's not broken. What is it? Not enforced? Is that what you're saying?
Not enforced is exactly what I'd say. Yeah. The visas for students and workers being abused by the person, that's real hard to overcome. But a lot of this is just not even effortfully enforced.
Sure. And I'll give credit to the border security agents and Homeland Security and the rest, but there just seems to be a lot more we can do. Penna, your comments?
Well, because people do illegal things like come into the country illegally or overstay their visas, that does not automatically confer on the American government the responsibility to do something to make them legal. I mean, that's the leap of logic that this president is taking, and he's saying he's trying to solve the problem of deporting millions of people. Well, we're not deporting millions of people, and nobody's asked anybody to do that.
Yes.
So it's a straw man argument, and the bad actors here. I mean, yeah, these people came for reasons, they're desperate, whatever, but it's them. It's not our government that's bad for not making them legal. And so I think we're taking it way, way too far.
Let's hear from the president for just a minute. We did have a clip where he did say that it isn't realistic to track down and deport every legal immigrant. So we'll jump past that one because you've already talked about that. But he did try to make the case that those who do stay and get permanent legal status of some sort would have some obligations to fulfill.
We expect people who live in this country to play by the rules. We expect that those who cut the line will not be unfairly rewarded. So we're going to offer the following deal. If you've been in America for more than 5 years, if you have children who are American citizens or legal residents, if you register, pass a criminal background check, and you're willing to pay your fair share of taxes, you'll be able to apply to stay in this country temporarily without fear of deportation. You can come out of the shadows and get right with the law.
Now, Kelly, I've just got a question. You've certainly gone to court before. Can you imagine somebody maybe having a client that's been here just 4 years and challenging that arbitrary 5-year cutoff? Mm-hmm. And where does this take us? It gets back to my argument that a lot of people are looking at this with a playing checkers mindset. But I think the president's playing chess. He's 2 steps ahead of everybody else and realizes where this eventually goes.
Yeah, it's what people need to understand, and I don't think very many people think about this, is the reason this is a difficulty is if the president, as an executive, ordered his officials or somebody else to do something that violated the Constitution, courts take care of that, right? You go into court, they say this violates the Constitution. That's not what he's doing. What he's doing is, and this is very difficult for courts to deal with, is he's saying, I know there's a law that we're supposed to enforce, but I'm not going to enforce this law.
Yeah.
And courts don't like to be brought in to basically be told, you order that elected official to do their job. Mm-hmm. The courts typically will say, well, sounds like you elected the wrong elected official, and that's your problem. You need to get rid of them. If they were engaged in affirmative type activity that violates the Constitution, you can immediately come in there. But it's very hard, and so that's why the legal challenges to this may or may not be successful, because what he's doing is unconstitutional. But the question is, will the courts want to weigh into that? Will they feel like it's too political, even though they really do have a duty to keep the separation of powers? So I think people need to understand that's what he's doing. He's technically what he's doing is he's writing which parts of the law he's going to have his, executive branch not, enforce on people. And so that's hard because it puts the judge in a situation of trying to order the president to do something affirmatively, which judges are very uncomfortable with.
And the only time we've had something where the courts have done that is in Richard Nixon's case, when there was a time in which, in order to maybe enact some policy, they did not spend money. They impounded certain funds. I think Howard Phillips was behind that back when he was in the Nixon administration. And of course, the courts did come back, and the Congress came back, because of course you had Democrats with a Republican president saying, no, if we allocate the money, you have to spend it. And this is similar to this, but we have seen this before with the Defense of Marriage Act, and we've seen this with DACA, and of course now with this immigration order. So it's rare, but again, if you get to a point where it's a constitutional crisis, it kind of brings us to what's next. I know that the current attorney general in the state of Texas, who now will be soon the governor, wants to file a lawsuit. But I also see here Senator Jeff Sessions saying the Republicans have no plan to block Obama on amnesty, and most of them got on a plane today to go back for Thanksgiving vacation. So where do you go?
It's a weird situation politically. First, talk about the legal. Yes, a lawsuit will almost assuredly be brought. My guess is there'll be one brought on behalf of the states. Evidently, Attorney General Abbott, soon to be Governor Abbott, will probably be one of the leaders of that. But I think they'll collect a lot of states that will want to be a part of that because they will be impacted by this law. I also would guess that there will be one brought by, or at least combined in with that, by some congressmen to say, hey, wait a second, this is my job. This is a violation of the separation of powers.
And they would have standing, too, wouldn't they? Better?
I think both would probably have standing if it was, in other words, I am sure there are going to be implications to the states, especially like Texas, because of what they just did.
Yes.
And so they can easily show, I am going to be damaged. We are going to have extra costs and because of something that was done unconstitutionally. And so that would tee it up. So I think, both of those. Now, skipping the legal and going to the political, the difficulty for the Republicans is there are remedies in the Constitution for this type of activity. And the difficulty is, well, let's start with the most obvious one, which is when the president tries to become emperor and says, I now have the powers of Congress, that's why you have impeachment. And I think this is like the ultimate type thing. This is the thing that you do get impeached for. I said that the first time he wouldn't enforce the DOMA. I just think you can't have a president who will not enforce laws that are duly passed by Congress and signed by other presidents. But politically, I think everybody believes that would be a really bad move because it would not be successful. It would divide the country, and it would kind of get the Republicans off message. In fact, there are many people that say that might be what President Obama is trying to accomplish.
Distraction, yeah.
And so that's the difficulty with the Republicans is it's almost like the smartest political strategy is to let this atrocity lie and let everybody, be sick to their stomach about it across the country so that people still have that taste and instead of sort of engendering sympathy for the president by something they do.
Well, we're going to take a break and we'll continue this conversation, but we'll also add some other conversation points in the second hour. But we did want to let you know that on our website today, we have a take action item, and this is one where you can contact your 2 members of the Senate and your 1 congressman. We have an 800 number, which is very easy. It asks what your zip code is, so it connects you up. And if you want to leave a message to them, you can do so. And so we encourage you yesterday to call the White House opinion line. Today, encourage you to let your members of Congress know, and those might be the ones that bring that suit that Kelly was talking about. We'll be right back.
If you have been listening, you've probably heard me talking about the power of $5. Someone did a little math around here and discovered if every Point of View listener gave $5 this week, it would keep us on the air for about 3 years, 36 months. That's encouraging, don't you think? I mean, sure, it would be nice if a millionaire stepped up and sent a check with a big number. The reality is all we really need is for everyone, for you, to do something. What I would like you to do today is find 2 friends, encourage them to join you in sending a gift, at least $5, more if you can. Challenge each other. Then the 3 of you go challenge 3 more. Just have everyone click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net. You go ahead, do it first. Pointofview.net. Or send your gift to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Thank you for doing your part in support of Point of View's $5 challenge. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. We talked about immigration in the first hour. We'll continue that, but I wanted to get back to the topic that we oftentimes start every program with, and that is the issue of religious liberty. If you go to our website right now for pointofview.net or go to the Point of View Facebook page, you will see a video. And it was very well done, Kelly, I might say, between Gretchen Carlson and Hiram, who's been on the program with us, and the student, and I hope her name is Liz Laverty. I think I've got that right. Yeah. But that was, it turns out, just one of two examples in which the administration of these public schools says, no, you can't have a Christian club on campus. I thought we had an Equal Access Act.
It really is incredible. And both these are in Long Island, New York. We had a young man who's just a great he's going to be, we're going to hear about him in the future. We just had a little conference where he was with us, and my friend Rick Beggs was introducing him and said, John is a 38-year-old man trapped in an 18-year-old body. He's just a go-getter. He's sharp as a tack, and he was told he couldn't have his club. They had the Gay Straight Alliance. They had everything else, but they said, you can't have a Christian club because, that would violate the law. And, this kid was good enough to stand his ground and say, and he knew they were wrong. And here he was telling the principals, you're not right about the law. You're not right. And he finally found us, and we got involved. We sent a letter to the school, and very quickly, after 2 years of stonewalling him, boom, he had his club. But it was right at the end of last year. So we come back to this year, and they start the process. And they deny him the club again. It's like, oh my gosh! And so this time we went a little quicker, and this time it didn't take too long for them to back down again. And you think at least we're done. And no. What happened is Liz saw this in the paper, and the same thing was happening to her in Long Island at her school district, and so she called us. And her case is. It's really compelling. I would encourage people to watch the video and see. She's a precious girl, 16 years old. She had thoughts of what it really is the meaning of life, almost suicidal-like, and her faith is what having that is what really changed her life. And so she wanted something like that for other students who wanted to be able to come and have that kind of an impact on their life. So here she is trying to start her Christian club. By the way, at her school, there's an animal rights club, there's a gay rights club, there's all this. But again, she was told, oh, no, you can't have a Christian club. That would be illegal. And again, so we had to send a demand letter to the school district saying, there's this federal law that was just passed 30 years ago.
There's a Supreme Court case called Mergen. Yes. So not only did it pass Congress, but there was a Supreme Court precedent.
We pointed out that, too.
My goodness.
It passed. Oh, yeah, and by the way, then it went up to the Supreme Court, and they said, that's right. It was 8-1, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just going from memory. But
sure.
Anyway, so that's the newest case. But I tell you, what I thought was, we were talking about this off air, what I thought was really neat was, and again, they can see this interview, pointofview.net, or go to libertyinstitute.org to see it both places. But obviously, Hiram Sasser, our director of litigation, did a great job. Liz did a fabulous job. But
they were on TV.
They were on TV. It was on Fox News Channel nationally. But my favorite part was at the very end, Gretchen turns to the camera and gives a monologue. I mean, she goes for about a minute about what is wrong with our country, and boy, she just nailed it. And so you don't see that very often on TV, and so I think your listeners will enjoy that and would probably want to send that around to people to see it, because there are still people who get that some people around this country are losing their mind, and some of those people are in media, and they're actually willing to speak up and say, this is ridiculous. This has to stop. So anyway, and I'm thankful for people like Liz and people like John.
Very impressive.
I mean, John stood. If John hadn't have stood up, Liz wouldn't have known there was a way for her to get help. And by Liz standing up, I bet there'll be other people who know, oh wow, I can get help. There's something I can do. So it is so neat when you watch people that are willing to be really heroes, and they come under some persecution for that. But the Lord always blesses that ultimately, not only in their lives, but in other people's lives.
Let's, if we can, give credit to Gretchen Carlson, 1989 Miss America, where she was Miss Minnesota the year before, of course, on Fox News. And I would encourage people to watch it. But then that's why we put it on Facebook. So it's real easy on Facebook to hit the share button, put it on your Facebook page, because people will be amazed. First of all, you just keep hitting your head as they're talking about this. Hiram did an outstanding job, by the way. Liz did as well. But then that last concluding set of comments by Gretchen Carlson. So Marlon used to give an attaboy award, a point of view attaboy
Gretchen
award.
Carlson
So we
gets
got to
an
get. She
attaboy award.
deserves one for sure. Ben, I know you have a few things to say.
Well, I was just thinking about high school kids and the issues that they face, and actually Liz summed them up, because she said love is louder than depression, self-harm, pressure, bullying, school, home life, addiction. Kids face a lot of problems in high school, and people who are administrators in high schools, rather than coming down against religious clubs or things where students could actually help each other out of these issues, they're coming down against them. And I've never been able to explain that. I do not understand why high schools are so dead set against allowing religion.
Yeah. And here's the thing.
And I want to talk about Maryland in just a minute. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll talk about that.
Think about, we don't know, but it would not be surprising to me at all to find out, in heaven, that because Liz did this, and because, I'm saying we're going to win, because we're going to win. The law is on our side. It's not over yet, but we're going to win. If that club meets, it wouldn't surprise me at all that either the next couple of years, or maybe even after she's gone, that somebody's life isn't saved because they're that. Like she's saying, depression, why am I even alive? It was her faith that got her through that. And it's a tough time for kids that age. That's when the most suicides occur, right? That's when these type of things happen. Who knows? And so it's something we talked about a lot when I talk to young people, but I say, you know what? If you really want to be an impact with your faith, then the one thing you're going to have is courage. Because whenever you get up to the edge of doing something that the enemy knows will have great impact, there will be an attempt to intimidate and to cause fear in you not to take the action. And so Liz, because she was bold enough, and John before her, there are a lot of people's lives that will be impacted by that they might not ever see until they're in heaven.
Well, again, thought you'd like to know a little bit about that. We'll get back to some of the other conversation points. So one of those, of course, is immigration. But if you'd like to join our conversation, we'll give you that opportunity to do so. 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. And as we've just mentioned a minute ago, we have posted a number of articles today. A lot of those relate to immigration. Of course, you can also watch the video. If you go where Kelly Shackelford's name is, you'll click on that button that says visit the website, and then you can go to the video section and find it there. Or, of course, we've also posted it on our website and on our Facebook page. That's probably a good place to go. Just go to Facebook and then pass it on to some others. I think you'll enjoy how articulate she was, but even more so, the final comments by Gretchen Carlson. She deserves an applause. So we'll take a break and come back and continue our conversation right after this.
The
Point of View commentary with Kerby Anderson.
You know, a recent article in USA Today warned technology can push our crazy buttons and rewire our brains. Staying connected with digital media can be both a blessing and a curse. For many people, checking in with their devices is getting out of hand. Howard Rheingold, author of NetSmart, How to Thrive Online, recommends a mindful use of digital media. That means we should be aware of what is attracting our attention. He says you should be making decisions instead of letting the tweet or buzzing of your BlackBerry call your attention. Gary Small, a brain researcher at UCLA, has found that the digital technology is changing our brains. Since the human brain changes in response to the environment, our use of the technology alters our brain pathways. He has documented this through MRIs and has reported his findings in scientific journals. Larry Rosen, author of I, Disorder, Understanding Our Obsession with Technology and Overcoming Its Hold on Us, says that technology is causing some people to exhibit various psychological disorders. This would include addiction, depression, narcissistic personality disorder, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. He is concerned that we have become too enmeshed with these technologies. Psychiatrist Stephen Davis of the Baltimore-Washington Medical Center says we get feedback from digital technology. The retweets and bings and pings that come out of our phone every time someone sends us a text message create a reward system in the brain that gives us a little squirt of dopamine each time. For some people, this can lead to something that looks like addiction as their brains respond to digital technology. These are just a few experts who are concerned about the effects of digital technology in our lives, and I'm even more concerned about their impact on the younger generation whose brains are being rewired in ways we can't even imagine. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join us, certainly lots of topics we put on the table, but immigration is something we'll return back to. But I did want to let you know a little bit about what's happening in the legal front. So let's take some more phone calls. And Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. Let's go to Dave in Missouri, KCMH. Dave, thank you for calling today.
Well, thanks for taking my call. What I got to say will take less than a minute. The civil rights laws were put on us by presidential executive orders and courts legislating from the bench. Brown versus the Board of Education, Virginia versus Loving, the integration of Little Rock High School. All those acts violated the 10th Amendment because marriage and education are left up to the states. Back then, even one-third of the black people did not want integration. Governor George Wallace warned about what is happening today.
Okay, I get your point. And you also had a few other things. You had the 1964 Civil Rights Act. You had the 1965 Voter Rights Act. But, you know, that's a good point, you know. And some people have said, well, those were extraordinary circumstances. I still think, you know, we have to recognize that the president should be limited. And if we start allowing the president to use any kind of executive order, whether it was civil rights in the 50s and 60s, whether it was Eisenhower, Kennedy, or Johnson, or whether it's, especially now, far beyond anything even those presidents would have imagined with President Obama with these executive orders, it brings us back to something, Kelly, you said, and I know that David Brooks last night was making that point. Can you imagine a Republican president? We'll call him President I don't know, Ted Cruz, president, whoever you want to pick up, you know, and that individual that is sitting in the Oval Office says, you know, Congress hasn't acted, so this is what I'm going to do, and if they want to put a bill on my desk, then maybe I'll change this. Can you imagine somebody saying that in the future? But the precedent is there, And already we have lawyers lining up saying, yeah, what the president doing is quite admirable and legal and constitutional. They have no idea what they might unleash upon themselves if you have a Republican president and a Republican House and Senate, say 2.5 years
It's
from
really
now.
foolish. And, I mean, maybe they're depending upon the president, the Republican Party to act, as foolishly as there's some talk that they're thinking about acting with a judicial filibuster, that, it'll just be a one-sided ratchet. Whenever the Democrats, they get control, they have their own constitution, and then the Republicans go back to the real constitution. I don't know. I mean, I think they should be smart enough to know that's not generally what's going to happen. Once you let the cat out of the box, it's out. But yeah, this is an important issue, and the problem is I don't think there's going to be any. I'm hoping the lawsuits. I know the courts will be reticent to. They'd love to say this is a political question I'm not going to answer, which they have the discretion to do. But I think it's important for the country that they do answer if there's a case on this. I think the separation of powers is very important. And if politics means people can't, do things that maybe they could do to settle the situation, I think it's the duty of the court to say this is beyond the line. I mean, this is a specific enumerated power of Congress. I mean, it specifically says immigration and naturalization. This is the power of Congress. And this is a violation of separation of powers. I think that would be good for the country. And Obama has really kind of done these kind of favors for us at clarifying the Constitution. He did it on his recess appointments, which were clearly unconstitutional. And I think this might be the next one. I think there's going to be some prizes ahead. I think Obamacare is basically going to be stricken at that case at the Supreme Court. We'll see, but I just unless one of the conservatives changes their mind, I cannot see Chief Justice Roberts saying, yes, it's written here, but we're not going to follow that.
Yeah, I don't see
that's
that
just
either.
not his approach. Yeah. So I think there's some big things coming, and I think this might be one of them. I hope so, because I think it would be good for the country. I think we need it to be very clear that the president is not the king. The president can't make up the rules. The president can't decide which laws he's going to enforce. We really need to make sure that we keep people within the lines, or we're going to really, we're going to be in trouble as a country in the future.
Let me read from the Constitution, then I'm going to get to Penna. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Article 1 deals with the Constitution, and it says that the Constitution and Congress, the Constitution gives Congress the exclusive authority to, quote, establish a uniform rule of naturalization. And so it is obvious that how we naturalize citizens, in other words, how we bring them in as citizens, is the responsibility of Congress, Article 1. Then you go to Article 2, Section 3, and it tells us what the president's responsibility is, and that is, quote, to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, unquote. But there's no part in Article 2 about establishing a uniform rule of naturalization. It is just that you execute the laws that were passed by what? Article 1, the United States Congress. Right. Okay? So in case anybody needs Constitution 101, there's the actual constitutional crisis that we're talking about. Penna?
All of us are looking at sort of in the aftermath of the announcement that it actually happened, first of all. We were kind of hoping maybe it wouldn't, but there's responses that have to be made. We've talked about all of them. I mean, impeachment would be one possibility, suing the White House, not funding it. And then another one that's been floated is passing different, better, more common sense legislation. But, to me, the one that makes the most sense is the lawsuits. But the question I guess I have for you, Kelly, is how long would that take? I mean,
I don't think it would take that long.
Yeah, they would file in D.C. court, wouldn't they not?
Well, wherever they file, I think it would be fast track.
Yeah, it'd be fast track.
And
it could go from there to the Supreme Court in months, couldn't it?
Well, I think, it might take as long as a year or whatever, but I do think that, and in the process, it might be stayed. I mean, the law, his order there might be a hold on it or something.
I hadn't thought of that one.
So
yes.
I think these lawsuits are going to happen. And I think no matter what your political persuasion is, everybody in the country should want these lines to be, very clear, because there's a reason why, we have the freedom we have in this country, because we don't allow the president to have powers beyond what are given in the Constitution. The president can't say, I suspend the legislature or I suspend the Supreme Court. They can't do that. And yet there are a lot of things being played with here that are setting precedents if they're not addressed. That will mean I don't care which political party is in control, that president is going to say, well, here's the precedent, here's the history. I can do this on any issue I want to do this on.
I have heard a rumor, can't verify it, but I've heard a rumor that Jonathan Turley has volunteered to represent the House of Representatives if that went to the D.C. court and to the Supreme Court. And that would be powerful because, as you and I just pointed out a minute ago, I've read enough of Jonathan Turley to know that he's not somebody to sit around this table with us too often and agree with some of the things we have to say, and certainly has been a supporter of the president, but not a supporter of his actions. And as you said more than once today, he is concerned that it's just tearing the fabric of the Constitution. So he would be a very powerful advocate for the people of the United States against, I guess it'd be the Obama administration.
I wonder if somebody shouldn't, they do this for presidency. I mean, maybe the Koch brothers, right? Let's say they ought to fund some ads, kind of like the ones with Charlie Crist in Florida, where they show Obama saying, well, if I did that, I'd be a dictator. And then him saying, I'm doing it. And then show him saying, you can't do that. That's not the way our constitutional system works. And then him doing it. Because that's the thing that's really disappointing is, I think within the last year is when he made those statements. He was very clear that he couldn't do this. He understands he can't do this, as this is not what the Constitution says. And then he turns around and does it. And so, I wonder but very few people, I think, the networks aren't showing those clips, not a lot of them.
Well, we have it on our website if anybody wants to see it. Now, it's harder to find because we've got a new website here, but if you go to shows and then click on yesterday, down at the bottom, we have the video that was put together, and I think this was by our good friends at Heritage Foundation, where you have the 21 different times where he said, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. And then, of course, I'm going to do it.
I'm doing it.
So
right.
if you wanted to see that, maybe also, again, put it on your Facebook page, put it up there with the one that Kelly Shackelford just recommended. I'm all about using social media to educate others. Penna?
I love Heritage. They have the people there, and being able to jump on these things very quickly.
Yeah, so it's right there for you, and we want to arm you with lots of news, information, and perspectives. Need to take a break, so when we come back, we'll take some phone calls. I see quite a number that want to talk about, for example, when we're talking about temporary status, what does that mean? Some want to talk to Kelly about this idea of impeachment, whether that's really possible. Some want to know whether or not the Senate has any responsibility. So I can see we've got some great calls here. We'll take those calls and continue our conversation today. If you find yourself saying, well, I'd like a little more information, we, of course, have posted quite a number of articles, one on the president's speech on immigration, so you have the actual text if you'd like to read it, of the response from the Republicans about that particular issue as well. And then also some of the questions about whether or not this is a distraction, and even some arguing that maybe it really is lawful. So you can get a chance to see quite a number of things, and we encourage you to read some of those. Maybe click on that share button, put them on your Facebook page or your blog, or maybe send it by email. Use it for a letter to the editor. And while we're talking about your action, we have a Take Action section where you can call your members of Congress and let them know what you think.
Imagine you're in a room with 99 other people, 100 of you total. All of you listen to Point of View. You have that in common. What you don't have in common is that only one of you, actually less than 1 in 100, has ever supported the work of Point of View. That's what a recent study showed. 1 in 100. Fewer than 1% have given. 99% have not. You listen. So I know you appreciate what this program provides. Now, I invite you to move from the big group to the little one. If 1/3, 33% of those listening, gives just $5 this week, we could fully fund Point of View for a year, 12 months. Not everyone will, not everyone can, but can you give $5 today, or maybe $55 or $105? Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or send your gift to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Join the few, the thankful. Support Point of View. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join us, Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. It is our weekend edition. We'll go first to New Hampshire, WSEW. Celeste, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hi, how are you, Kerby?
Very good. I think you have some questions for our panelists, so what would you like to ask?
It was just one, really. I heard you said, or I heard the president say, actually, about the immigration, that they will be here temporarily. What does he mean by that? And I have no clue what he means. He didn't go on about how long, 6 months, a year?
3 years. It's 3 years. But it's not that they'll be here for temporarily. It's that this law is only for 3 years. Or this ruling that he's made, this order.
Yeah, when you hear the word temporarily, you say, oh, okay, well, then maybe they'll go back to their country of origin. Oh, no, though.
No.
With a sweep of his pen, those people that have been in the shadows are out, and they have had various people come on these talk shows in the last few hours that have said, oh, I'm so grateful now that I can actually go and not have to hide from ICE, or I've always wanted to go back and visit my mother, but I was afraid if I did so, since I didn't have a legal passport, I'd never get back into this country, and so they're here forever.
And will they be encouraged to become citizens, perhaps, and so they could stay here permanently, or this is just a short-term thing?
President said in his speech that theoretically they would pay a fine and go to the back of the line. But again, I keep saying theoretically, because Kelly, you know as well as I do, you've worked with the courts before. All it takes is one activist group to find one individual that was disenfranchised to go find a liberal judge, and for that liberal judge to say, wait a minute, we have provided these people, and what's the technical term here? I got to get it again, but it's that permanent kind of legal status, but they aren't actually citizens. And so we can't let people just be in this kind of legal no man's land. So we obviously have to give them the right to vote. And in order to vote, they have to have a photo ID in many of these states. So they have to be able to get driver's license. And of course, if they get hurt, it seems to me that they, especially if they're paying taxes into the system, they should get all the health care benefits. And pretty soon they become de facto citizens, even if they've never applied for citizenship, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, this is obviously an attempt to move them towards citizenship. I mean, that's exactly what is being attempted here. I don't think anybody really questions that.
They're called lawful permanent residents. Again, the president talked about the fact that
permanent.
if you...
3 years
there's
permanent.
Back to that. Yeah,
Which
I'm just reading again. Here it is, that anybody that's lived in the United States for more than 5 years and are parents of U.S. citizens are lawful permanent residents. So again, this is an attempt to take all of the parents of those kids who were born here, and that gets into a conversation we had yesterday about whether the 14th Amendment really should grant every person that is born in this country automatic citizenship. But nevertheless, that's the way we interpret the laws right now. Then anybody that was born here, if their parents are here, they get to stay as well if they've been here 5 years.
It's anchor babies in a sense.
That's
so,
right.
but what struck me for a minute too was just, okay, that cutoff is 5 years. If you've been here more than 5 years, so if you've been disobeying the law for 5 years or more, you get to have this status. If it's less than 5 years, you don't get it right now.
Can't you see incrementally where this is going? I had somebody yesterday say, wait a minute, this is all that the president is asking for. And I recognize this is all the president is doing. But can we not see down the road and see that there's going to be a court challenge as to whether or not 5 years is arbitrary and whether or not that can be constitutional? Kelly's smiling over here because you can find a liberal judge. You go job shopping, you can find a judge to do just about anything that you want, right?
Well, sure. I mean, and again, you could see equal protection arguments that
for sure.
People are in different classes by this, and it's again. I mean, I think everybody knows what's being attempted. I mean, they're moving these people who came into the country illegally to citizenship, and step one is have them come out in the open and say who they are and say we're not going to send you away. And then step number 2 will be full citizenship.
Let's take some more phone calls. We'll go to Colorado this time. I think there's a question we have for Kelly Shackelford. Greg, listening on KTGW. Greg, thanks for calling today.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you taking my call. I had a statement, if I could, first, and then kind of lead me into my question. I believe the president has committed some acts in the last 6 years that were probably impeachable offenses, and the House hasn't acted on it, obviously because the Senate hasn't had the Republican control. And then Mr. Shackelford had mentioned here earlier that he didn't think that impeachment was going to probably proceed with because the Senate was not controlled by the Republicans. My question, sir, is that something they could actually act on next year?
Well, they could, but see, the problem is it's not a majority in the Senate. That's what I'm saying. Even though the Republicans will have control of the Senate, they would have to get a large number of Democrat votes to convict. You impeach in the House, and then you convict in the Senate. And so it's essentially like kind of like the prosecutor gets the indictment in the House, and then you go before the jury in the Senate. And the problem is, in order to get again, it's not a majority. It's like a supermajority. In order to get that, It wouldn't just be Republicans. You'd have to have a lot of Democrats joining you. So for that reason, I think they know, even if all the Republicans agreed, which probably don't, there's no way they could ever convict. So it would sort of dust up a lot of smoke and all that, and probably incite political bases for both parties and sort of distract off of the issues. So I think that's politically why the Republicans have talked about that they really don't have any desire to do that. And I think that's why the Obama administration has been trying to kind of bait the Republicans to impeach, because they think it would fire up their base and get some excitement, which currently their own base isn't even excited about the president. So I think that's the political calculations that are going on.
What about the idea that many Republicans actually want this whole immigration comprehensive kind of transformation? I mean, really, all the Republicans aren't unified against it anyway.
Right. Well, and even if I wish they would solve the immigration issue. I mean, it's kind of obvious how it's being used on the Democrat side. They love to talk about it, but they really don't want to solve it because it's a good political issue for them. When President Obama was president and he had the House and Senate, it was all Democrat. It could have been easily done. But notice it wasn't. And that's because it's a great political issue. They score, points on the political side this way. And so I really don't think they want it solved. And so I'm not sure it's ever going to be solved unless something changes.
Let's take at least one more phone call before we take a break again, and we'll go to Oklahoma this time. KPDR, Victor, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you for taking my call, Kerby.
What would you like to share with us?
I wanted to share, because of whenever Harry Reid was the Senate Majority Leader, why not, instead of going back the way it was and stuff, let the Democrats know that whatever is in place right now is going to stay in place when the Republicans come into office.
Oh, okay. You're raising another question about the filibuster, I think, as well. Let's talk about that for just a minute. We have one of our articles about that, but Kelly, I think you can, in the time we have before our break, kind of explain the issue.
Yeah, the filibuster, has been in the Senate for a long time. Using a filibuster against confirming of a judicial appointment is very recent. It was, I think, first used against George Bush. And
Alberto Gonzalez.
Yeah, and so
yes.
Essentially what it is it takes 60. It doesn't just take a majority to confirm the president's nominee to the court. You can filibuster it, and the only way to stop a filibuster is if you have 60 votes. So that was a recent. It was a recent action, and something that was happening when the Democrats had the Senate this last time. They decided they didn't like that anymore. Again, they're the ones who used
After
it first.
they used
exactly.
it on all kinds of
They
nominees
used it on
from
the
Bush.
Republicans, and then the Republicans started using it on them now that they had control. And so they decided they didn't like it, so they did away with it and said, no, it just takes a majority to give it consent to the judicial appointments. And so the argument now is there are some Republicans who allegedly are Republican senators who are allegedly talking about bringing back the old rule now that they have control, which would essentially be giving the Democrats now the ability to stop all of their judicial nominees. So it'd essentially be playing by two different sets of rules. They would put more onus rules on themselves than the Democrats, which makes no sense. It just makes people's head want to explode. Why would you do such a ridiculous thing? But that's exactly what's being discussed by some Republican senators.
I might just mention that we talked about Wall Street Journal, but Wednesday's piece by the editorial board, Republicans and the Filibuster, kind of explains that in a little more detail. It helps us understand that we should get rid of that. I've never thought that you should allow 39 or 40 people the opportunity to block a nominee. And so it didn't make sense before. It doesn't make sense now. And now that Harry Reid's changed it, it's changed. Don't need to go back to the old rules. Let's take a break. We'll take some more phone calls right after this.
On my recent trip to the Holy Land, we did something very special. We visited a church at Cana in Galilee, the site where Jesus performed the first miracle, turning water to wine at a wedding. We had a ceremony there in which the married couples in our group renewed our wedding vows. It was good to do this, to ponder the meaning of the vows spoken. And it got me thinking about the weddings in which couples write their own vows. We wrote some of ours so many years ago, but when it comes to the theology of marriage, those vows are normally deficient. One Southern Baptist leader, Dr. Russell Moore, says he doesn't let couples he marries write their own vows. He was asked why not on his radio show. His answer was, quote, "Because I think we are in a culture right now where many people assume that the wedding is the celebration of the love of the couple. Now, of course it is to some degree, but it is so much more than that, and the main point of the wedding is about more than highlighting the individuality of the couple." Dr. Moore went on to say, "In a biblical understanding of marriage, the couple is being given to one another, and there is an accountability, a public accountability for the marriage, for the wedding. That's the reason why Jesus is present as part of the community at a wedding at Cana, and in the epistles of the New Testament, the writings about marriage are not simply to the couples themselves, but to the entire body of Christ. We are members of one another, and we are responsible for one another. And so, when we are gathering together for a wedding, we have a gathering of witnesses." Pastor John Piper addresses wedding vows in his book, This Momentary Marriage. He writes, "When a couple speaks their vows, it is not a man or a woman or a pastor or parent who is the main actor, the main doer. God is. God joins a husband and a wife into a one-flesh union." Dr. Piper's entire book is about how marriage is meant to glorify God. And that's why Jesus said in Mark 2, "What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate." When couples get married, they don't know what they will encounter over time or what their spouse will really be like in 30 years. That person could become a lot better or worse. That's why we pledge to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, and so on. John Piper says our forefathers who created these vows had eyes wide open to reality. Betrothed couples don't know what will come. When they're 20-something, they really don't know. When you pledge your troth, you promise faithfulness. In that, God is glorified. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, back for just a few more minutes. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, and I did mention this piece in the Wall Street Journal, Republicans and the Filibuster, and also misspoke a minute ago. It was actually Miguel Estrada that was the first one blocked, but since then it was, Janice Rogers Brown, Priscilla Owen, Charles Pickering. Well, it would take me a couple of minutes to read them all. Just all the people that were blocked by the filibuster. So I think it's good to get rid of that. But you had at least another comment before taking another phone call.
I think there's an extra angle to this that's going to be fascinating, and that is that for whatever reason, there's some of the Republicans wanting to bring back and basically put leg weights on them when it's their turn to sprint.
Do they not think the Democrats would just take it back again when they got in power again? What
I don't know what they think. It's really, really bizarre thinking.
Yeah, but there's no reason you should have a filibuster of a judicial nominee.
Right.
This has never made any sense to me, even when it was used by Republicans. Rarely it's
it
been
makes it
used
very
by
political when the president should be able to appoint people in only for some really egregious problem should they be denied.
But the thing that's fascinating about this is that the some of the key people in this is where is Rand Paul going to be on this? Mm-hmm. Where is Ted Cruz going to be on this? Because I think if they're not careful, if Rand Paul, and I've heard rumors that he's actually at least was leaning in this way, if he were to come out and bring this judicial filibuster back, which would make it difficult. For a Republican president to get through a good nominee in the future, I think the base would react. I mean, these are the people. For the people who are running for president, I would think they would want to stay hold the line to be pretty conservative. So I think it'll be fascinating to watch this play out, to see if the Republicans are foolish enough to do this to themselves, and then to also watch the people who are running for president and see what they do, because I think that's going to tell you a lot of of where the base is on it.
I think most people don't really like the filibuster in the first place. I mean, since we always believe in majority rule, if you have 51 votes in the Senate, that should pass. But especially when you have a 60-vote filibuster, that means that if you can come up with 41 people that are against it, but obviously, again, you have 59 that are for it, the 41 trump the 59. That never sets well with Americans, but especially when you're talking about judicial nominees, which is supposed to not be partisan. And at a time, Kelly, you can speak to this issue as well, many of these benches are not full anyway because of the long, tedious process of confirmation in the first place.
No, that's right. And again, it would not affect the judicial the filibuster on other items.
Right.
But it's different when you bring something up through the Senate and you have that tradition. It's very different when this isn't something that's coming up through the Senate. This is the president making his appointment, which he's supposed to do, and the Senate is supposed to give advice and consent. And as you say, I think that's more of a majority rule type situation, because it's really just, is there some extreme situation here where the president is trying to appoint someone that we just can't appoint?
Let me at least get one call, because this whole issue of immigration also impinges on something else, and that is the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare. And I think Kathy in California wants to take us down that road. Kathy, what would you like to share with us today?
Yes. Okay, so the Affordable Care Act is based on taxes that now that we are all required to pay. So Obama's statement was that they would have to pay their fair share of taxes. My question is how many of them have already signed up on the Affordable Care Act to Americans in this country? And if they have signed up more than the American people, where would that land us in the Supreme Court over that?
Not sure I quite get the question, but you're talking about whether or not the court would challenge whether those people should receive benefits. Is that what you're getting at?
No, what I'm asking, would they then still uphold possibly the affordable health care?
In other words, because of the...
They would be then entitled, because according to what Obama said, if I'm not mistaken, and if I am, you can correct me, that if they paid their fair share in taxes, that would mean that they would be entitled to health care, Social Security, and such. So that would mean that if they signed up, where would that land us as far as, because a lot of people in this country are not happy with the fact that the health care bill is still standing because it's not affordable, it's not realistic, but that would be another way for the Democrats to retain whatever power that they are trying to hold on to.
Well, again, we can talk about the actuarial issue, and that is you add 12 million more people into Obamacare that aren't in it right now, especially when they have such health care needs. I think everybody's premiums and deductibles go up, don't you think, Penna?
I know that in the speech, at least, it was said that these people would be paying more taxes.
True. And
that they would get Social Security cards. They would get Social Security numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether they would get to be part of Obamacare or a part of the Affordable Care Act or not. I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that if they were, the subsidized policies would be going disproportionately to that kind of a population. So it would make the Affordable Care Act less affordable for the nation.
I would think so. And I'm reading right now from the White House, because they send us all these faxes here and everything like that it would create a mechanism that requires certain undocumented immigrants to pass a background check to make sure they start paying their fair share in taxes. Then it doesn't talk about, well, do they then have access to all those benefits? A lot of these things are left out.
Nebulous.
And even if they don't receive them initially, I'm back to my other argument, checkers and chess, or what kind of judicial activism could eventually grant them full citizenship benefits, even if they're not full citizens.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and I think this will be fascinating to wait and see. I think everybody knows that the Republican side, is against all this. I think, in light of what we talked about earlier with Oregon, for instance, 67% voting against illegal aliens having driver's licenses. I think it's very likely that Democrats, certainly working class Democrats, are going to be upset by this.
Well,
I mean, this
why
is
wouldn't you be?
5 million workers thrown into the legal workforce at a time when people are dropping out of even hunting for work.
Sure. And those 5 million become 12 million is kind of my argument. It's sooner or later that happens.
But just the 5 million alone immediately is a huge hit. And so, now, if you're a construction worker or you're a, whatever, you've now got huge competition, and they're all legal. It's not, businesses that are having to flaunt the law. It's they've got a card, they're all legal. So, I mean, you've got to think that sort of the Reagan Democrats, that's the type that probably would go, what? You're doing what?
Union members.
Yeah. So I think it'll be fascinating to see how that plays out as well.
Well, thank both of you for being here today. And next week, we have decided to at least talk a little bit about Thanksgiving, but we're going to do that in the second hour. Rob Gregg will be with us as we talk about the Pilgrim Chronicles. We have David Barton with us,
right,
and a few others. But the first hour, we're leaving free because we recognize we haven't heard from Ferguson, Missouri. We haven't heard the last of Jonathan Gruber and Obamacare, and I guarantee you we've not heard the last about immigration. So thank you both for joining us here today. We will be running a tape on Thursday and Friday, though, but we will do some live programs next week, and there is a lot more to happen then. Let me recognize again the contribution that Kelly Shackelford makes, and you can click on the picture where his picture is and hit See More. That will take you to Liberty Institute. You can also watch the video, or you can go to our Facebook page. If you'd like to hear Penna Dexter's commentary, certainly just go to that left-hand corner there. It's called Wedding Vows, and it's in the Viewpoint section. And finally, just before we end with our program today, we have a Take Action item in the very middle. As you click on that, we give you an opportunity to tell your 2 senators and your member of Congress what you think about this immigration law. And all you have to do is click through there and use some of the information we have as you get on your phone and give them a call. Of course, you can send them an email too, but we've made it very easy. Have a great weekend, and we will see you back here on Monday.
There is a big incentive to pay your electric bill. If you don't, you find yourself cold and in the dark. But who pays to make sure you're educated on the key issues of the day, to bring you wisdom for life at work, at home, and in the culture, like you hear from guests here on Point of View? Who makes sure that our electric bill gets paid? You're way ahead of me, aren't you? That's right. You do. The truth is, if every listener this week gave just $5, we could pay our bills for about the next 3 years. Did you hear me? $5, 3 years. Now, perhaps you can give more. How about $50 or $500, maybe even more? But please, don't be the one who fails to send at least $5. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or send $5 to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Whatever amount you chip in, thank you for your gift. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.